On this episode of the podcast, I have me, Atli Thorkelsson. He is the VP of Talent Network at Redpoint Ventures. We're going to be talking about founders hiring their go-to-market leaders. Obviously, these are challenging roles. Founders sometimes are actually doing them. They have to offload them. They have to look at who, when, those dynamics are important. And also, these roles sometimes are a little bit tribal and sometimes not clear. So Atli's going to walk us through all this and maybe more. We'll see how far we can go. I appreciate you being on the show.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thrilled to be here.
Awesome, man. Before we start, Redpoint Ventures, what do you guys do over there?
We do a lot in B2B across the board, and then a handful of consumer and marketplace facing companies as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm sure you have seen a founder or two in your time, and as you mentioned when we initially spoke, go-to-market roles are always tricky. I guess let's start off. A founding team, typically 2, 3. Well, it could be a single person, but typically a couple people. They're hitting the ground running. At some point, they start realizing, well, they do have to sell the product. They might or might not have those skills in house, right? They might be just wearing those hats. Do you typically see a tipping point in which a founder needs to start thinking about hiring, specific go-to-market leaders on their team?
I think there's always nuance to it. I mean, it depends on the skill set of the founders. There's of course a lot of benefit to having some degree of founder-led sales in the early days, just to make sure that, you're on the right path with customers and, kind of how you're building the product. I think it, given that it takes at least a few months to hire a go-to-market leader, we try to see around the corners for the founders of, when are they going to most likely be needing that. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule, though.
So I guess when it comes to hiring a go-to-market leader, the founding team might or might not have those skill sets in-house. How much of the time should a founder, and I know this is every circumstance will be different, but generally speaking, they have to think about the problems they have now and potentially forecast out problems they might have. How much time should they spend going, I need to hire for the now versus potentially, looking down the road just a little bit?
You always have to hire for now. I mean, you have to have somebody that can do the job now. In a perfect world, you can identify people that have a high slope that could grow into a different role as the company grows, but you won't make it there unless the candidate you are hiring can do what needs to be done now. So, retaining top performers and getting people that can scale with the companies in the early days, that does a lot for maintaining institutional knowledge, building culture, things like that. But there's no two ways about it. You have to hire somebody who can do the job today.
And what's interesting to that point is you see a lot of founders who know they have to make that hire and are looking for a very ideal fit. Obviously, the company is it's their livelihood. They're putting blood, sweat, and tears into this business, taking all the risk. When it comes to this hire, they might or might not have a ton of experience within the particular go-to-market function, but also as a founder, they do have to kind of look beyond what they may be comfortable hiring for, right? So if it's a technical co-founding team, they're probably very comfortable hiring engineers or technical people, but to hire somebody on sales or a CS role, that might be different. Do they have to adjust how they're viewing this hire because maybe it's a little bit outside of what they've actually done hands-on in the past?
Yeah, a ton. I mean, it's not even just that they probably don't have this skill set. Many of our founders have hired a VP of sales before, but the market dynamics are different. The product that they're selling is different. The motion is different. And so there's a huge part of my role is educating founders just on what to look for. So first and foremost with our founders, we get them smart on the role, get them to speak with leaders who have done this before, founders who have built through the same stages and maybe have a similar go-to-market motion. We have them talk to the board. We have them talk to executive recruiters that can give them a better feel for what the market is going to hold for a role like that they're looking to hire. And while that might seem like a lot of investment on the front end, it does save them time in the long term. It allows them to enter into a search process with a more complete idea of not just what they're looking for, but what candidates are looking for. And ultimately, just, if you're recruiting in the right way, or you're working with a great executive search firm, chances are the first handful of candidates you see are going to be the best ones. So walking into the process with a good feel for what you need is really important. So you don't blow it with those first batch of candidates. You know how to vet them, you know how to attract them, you know what you're looking for enough that you can be decisive with great candidates.
I guess and just to follow up there, because I think it's interesting, the first batch of candidates might be the best. We also see, not again, talking generalizations, we do see time to time a founder want to interview further just because they want to be sure, right? Obviously, big role, big decision. They want to move that, hey, I'm 85, 90, 95% confident, just a little bit more turnover, one more candidate. That is not a bad thing in of itself. It also poses a risk to, as you said, the first batch that might have been the best batch. And I don't think it's unfair. I mean, a lot of people, when we're looking for a place to eat, we don't go on Yelp, find the first thing and stop. We might go through 4 or 5 and go through a few more on Instagram until we find something. So I mean, that's something pretty simple, transactional. How do you help a manager, a founder, understand that first batch of candidates actually might be the best, and potentially waiting to see more doesn't mean waiting to see better. It's just waiting to see different.
Well, I'll use VP of sales as an example. It's a very painful one to get wrong. So it's something that we deal with a lot. We're trying to make sure that our founders are set up for holistic success across the board so they can build the best company that they can. And if they're less experienced in go-to-market, we want to surround them with people that know go-to-market. And so maybe those people are a part of the interview process. Maybe they're just doing a lot of education. Maybe they're behind the scenes. And I do a lot of this as well, behind the scenes, kind of guiding the founder on, yes, this candidate's a fit. Yeah, no, this one isn't. Maybe push on this specific thing with this person. And I think it's important that founders have experts on their bench that have complementary skill sets, so that they can have a unbiased, or at least a less biased view into what great looks like.
I like that. What great looks like. And I guess if it's a technical team, they're very comfortable with the concept of, tester development or unit testing, but really to, in all cases, to kind of have a test to determine whether or not they're successful when they write code. I mean, that's pretty common in most components of engineering. A clearly defined role is one thing, but then to know when you found somebody is absolute other. And that's, I think, really when we talk about hiring, I think a lot of times when people, are like, hey, this hiring manager is taking a little bit longer, I think sometimes they just haven't defined what that end goal should be. So it's hard to pinpoint, especially when it comes to sales, where you can't necessarily, and we'll use your sales example. I think it's a great one. It's hard. You can't go sit down and code this, do this lead code test, do this hacker rank. I can see the outcome. You're talking to somebody. Salespeople are typically charismatic. They are personable. When it comes to, and we can just maybe use this as a specific one, a sales, like what are some of the hard to see skill sets that lie underneath that charisma that you need to look for? And what are some of the false positives that you'll run into?
I think the things that are maybe a little less obvious to look for a VP of sales candidate in this example, are they curious about the holistic business? Because I think that a lot of times the questions that come naturally to ask are, what was the ACV at your last company? How long did the sale take? Who was your buyer? Like things like that, more kind of tactical things. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that you really want to test for is this somebody that's going to be thinking in a way that is in the long-term interest of the company? So they're not necessarily trying to push through a sale to hit their number for the quarter. They're trying to target the customers that are going to be really successful in the long term, that can probably be reference customers, and that can be successful even without a more mature infrastructure around customer success or solutions architecture or implementations. And so there's kind of a not altruistic, but a bigger picture focus for those people. And one way to test for that is like, how deep are they getting into the product, the customer motion, the intangibles around around the motion. And then, well, I'm going to try to say this with as little bias as possible, but look for leaders that spend a lot of time recruiting. A talent hires A talent, B talent hires C talent, and that is never more true or more impactful than in the early days when those are the people that are going to hire the next batch of people that are going to hire the next batch of people. And so just making sure that they care deeply about bringing in really stellar people, the long-term impacts of those are hard to overstate.
Great advice, great insights. I guess just maybe a final question along the sales example, because I think it's a really good example. And it's probably a really hard one because you get your product up and running and you got to sell it. So this is mission critical stuff. You're a founder, you bring in somebody as a sales leader, you thought you've done the job. If you've not done, and let's say you've not done this, right? Because I think some people listening might have not been there before. How long do you wait? Because again, if you're a more technical founder, co-founder, you understand some of those things that you might be looking for. On the sales side, you might be involved in sales, but you're not actually that, quote unquote, laptop briefcase carrying salesperson every day. What do you start looking for to make sure that your hire is on the right track? And then also, how do you get out of their way? Because it's kind of a little bit of an art and science in that one.
Yeah, and every function is different. I would say for sales, you'll be able to tell pretty quickly. Are they impacting the customer journey and the cycle time? They should be able to do that stuff pretty quickly. What is the caliber of the first batch of people that they do hire into the company? I think with sales specifically, you are able to tell pretty quickly. And that's why I think, candidates that have had a couple of longer tenures in a head of sales role, that does speak a lot to it. If there's maybe no other role that where it's as much of a red flag to have bounced around a lot, just because you should be able to come in and make a meaningful impact pretty quickly. As far as specifics, I mean, that's specific to your business and things like that. But you should be, by the next board meeting, pretty much, you should be able to tell that they're making an impact and be able to communicate that to your board.
So in terms of a founder who's sitting down to help put together and define this role, I guess one thing that they're probably looking at is some of the stuff that they've been working on the last, however many months, however many years. Part of this role has been a part of their life. They have to now divest that. They have to define a clear role outside of their just scope and vision of the role, because there's industry standard roles, right? You can't, sales, go to market. These are roles that are clearly defined. How do you help a founder kind of make sure they aren't blinded by the fact that they've been doing some of these activities and that the role is actually clear so that other people who are looking to be hired for this role will be able to understand it?
I think it goes back to that kind of surrounding yourself with people that know that work. I mean, there's a lot that I can help with in the executive hiring process. I have never done the job. And so having people that have and can speak really knowledgeably about not only how to hire the right person in the recruiting process, but how to evaluate whether that person's successful and, once they are in the seat, how to make sure that they are set up for success. I mean, one of the things that has stuck with me a lot, we had an event where we had Chris Degnan as the CRO of Snowflake. We had him come in and speak as a panelist just about his kind of journey going from, the first sales hire there to what they are today. And one of the things that stood out to me was that he made it basically a stipulation of his employment that they bring on a go-to-market focused board member. And I thought that was super thoughtful, because not only does that, give what he's trying to do a little bit more credence in the boardroom, but it's also somebody that he can learn from. And, he hadn't done that job before. So having somebody there that can mentor him through that, but also that can, that is beholden to the board and can kind of make sure that the interests of the company are met, I think was a really interesting approach to that.
I guess flip side to that, when you have to help challenge some aspects of the role that's been created, maybe it's a bit of a hybrid. They want the salesperson to also field some customer success calls. I mean, it might not be a bad thing, obviously, early days, but younger, earlier stage companies are hoping for people to wear multiple hats. In go-to-market roles, is that potential risk? Is it fair expectation if you're really early stage to wear multiple hats in some of these go-to-market roles?
I am a big believer in hiring truly great people anytime you're fortunate enough to engage with them, even if you have to move some pieces around to make them fit. And generally, when I see this be successful is, you have a VP of sales role open. You don't have a head of customer success. This person has done it before. It makes sense to have them do it. It doesn't really make sense to go out and target a VP of sales, hire, but then also have the expectation that they're going to take on all these other pieces of the customer journey. So it can be additive, but not subtractive, I think. Most of the candidates that I place into our portfolio companies aren't a perfect fit for the specific role that they have at the time. They can come in and do this, but they also have experience with other pieces of the journey that they're going to need help with. And so part of that comes down to attracting candidates and making the scope of the role interesting enough that they, want to maybe do the journey that they just did, but with a broader scope to make it interesting for them. Maybe it is just, it streamlines the process and you can hire fewer people to get more done. I think as long as there's a clear expectation that they are primarily focused on what they're primarily hired to do, and that they maintain that as their primary function, I think it can be very successful to kind of cobble together some roles and add on some responsibilities. With the exception of, again, stage-specific skills. That is non-negotiable.
I guess before we let you go, any advice? I mean, you've covered a lot of examples, situations for the go-to-market roles. I think you've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything advice when you are onboarding a founder, helping them, look for these type of executives? Is there any type of basic advice that you're like, these are the tenets that you got to make sure going into this, you're paying attention to if you want to be successful?
I think the most broadly applicable advice that I give is that you never really know when somebody is going to be valuable to you. So if people stand out as impressive or, somebody that you would like to work with, they might not be a fit for your stage. They might not be a fit for open roles that you have. They might not be a fit for various reasons, but you never really know who's going to come back around either as a candidate or as an advisor or a board member down the road or as a customer. I mean, you never can't really predict that efficiently. So if there are people that impress you, make sure you have some sort of personal CRM system, some sort of reminder system in place to make sure that you stay in touch with those people. Because 2-3 years down the road, that could be your next VP of sales.
I think first of all, that's a great piece of advice. I don't think that's actually basic. It is broad, but that's absolutely super valuable. And I think a lot of other functions could do well applying that. So thank you for sharing that. Ali, I've literally taken you through the gauntlet of all questions, go-to-market leader, potentially hired. So I appreciate it. You've been awesome. We probably haven't covered all the topics, all the aspects. If somebody does have, if a founder wants to reach out because they have a go-to-market question, how can they connect with you?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Or, my email is posted on there. Feel free to drop me a note. I'm happy to wax poetic about talent stuff anytime.
Awesome, man. I definitely appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Amir.
All right, that's it for this episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, I really thought this episode, I kind of had a different construct in my mind, but Atli was definitely able to go through different scenarios. So I think that's going to be valuable. If you're a founder out there, you're thinking about go-to-market hiring, we covered a lot of different things. Please reach out to him if you do have something that we didn't touch on. He's definitely got a great background in this space. Please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the podcast is doing. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.